Today I will be revisiting my most used lens in the past 12 months, Tamron 28-75mm F2.8 Di3 RXD for Sony E-mount. This lens was released about a year ago and it was basically the perfect match for Sony A7III released just a couple of months before that. This combination kind of became bread and butter equipment for advanced content creators, freelance photographers and filmmakers. In this video, I will talk about my long-term experiences with this lens and about a couple of smaller things that I've noticed over the time but haven't talked about before. What made this lens so successful is basically the combination of very usable focal range, f2.8 aperture, good optical performance, relatively compact size, very reasonable price, and the fact that you can mount it on Sony A7III. I was lucky to get one very early, but it was out of stock for the better part of the last year. Fortunately, the availability is much better now. Every lens is a compromise, and one of the compromises here is that it starts at 28mm. That is still wide enough for majority of use cases, but I really like 24mm focal length, so I do miss that a bit. Despite that, I found this focal range to be very useful for my travel photography and gear reviews. On the other hand, there are no compromises when it comes to aperture, because this is f2.8 constant aperture lens. That means that it is very suitable for low light and for blurring the background, although there are some specifics here and I will talk about those later. It is just 12 cm long and it weighs only 550 grams, which is great for a full frame lens with this focal range and aperture. The whole construction is plastic, but I don't really mind that. After a year of use, there are basically no wear marks on this lens. It actually feels very solid, the plastics are very high quality, which saves cost and weight, so I'm okay with the build quality. The mount is still metal of course, and there is a gasket around the mount because this lens is weather sealed, which is very nice at that price point. It is pretty good match for Sony A7III in terms of the size and weight. A7 III is a very small camera for a full frame, but I think that the balance is generally okay. It has 67mm filter thread, which is very common size, so it should be pretty easy to find suitable filters. I really like to use PolarPro quartz line filters with 28-75 and A7 III. These are probably the best filters on the market in terms of the optics, so these are not particularly cheap, but the performance is worth it in my opinion, and I especially like to use combined ND and polarizing quartz line filters. Tamron 28-75 is very simple lens in terms of the controls. There is just focusing ring and zoom ring. Focusing ring is located behind the zoom ring, so I had to get used to that, but it is not a problem for me. It is actually very good focusing ring considering that it is focused by wire system. I wish it had a little bit more resistance, but it is very precise and importantly it is linear, so you can make repetitive focus pulls with the same results. Overall, I do like manual focusing on this lens. The zoom ring has good grip and reasonable amount of resistance, but I have used smoother focus rings. It is not bad though, it got much better after some time of using and it is possible to make fairly smooth zoom-ins with this lens. There is no autofocus manual focus switch on this lens. I do miss that a bit since it is not available on Sony A7III either, but it is possible to live without it. Regarding the optical qualities, I think that those are generally very good. With 24 megapixel full frame sensor, the sharpness is really good from wide open at f2.8, even the corners are more than usable. It increases up to f8, but for the real world use it is okay to use it anywhere from f2.8 to f11 depending on the scene, and that is basically the case throughout the whole focal range, even though the sharpness decreases just a bit toward the long end. The contrast is very good as well, and importantly there is no noticeable tint. 28-75 relies quite a bit on software corrections, especially at wide end. If you turn those off, there will be significant amount of barrel distortion, but there is no reason to do that. I generally don't mind software corrections as long as the result looks good, and it indeed looks good. There is a profile correction in Lightroom and Luminar 3.1, JPEGs and video are fixed in camera, so that is not a problem. There is very low amount of chromatic aberration that can be further improved in post, so that is not a problem either. Regarding the bokeh or the rendition of autofocus background, that is a bit specific. If the background is fairly simple or sufficiently far from the subject in focus, it looks good. If the background is more complex, it doesn't look that great. It can be a bit harsh, but it also depends on the specific scene. I wouldn't say that it is generally bad, but it has a bit of a specific look in some cases. 28-75 is also a very solid semi-macro lens. The minimum focus distance is just 19 cm at the wide end and 39 cm at the long end. It is generally very suitable for product shots and for something like wristwatches. One of the things that I have noticed over the time is that when you shoot right at the minimal focus distance, there is some amount of ghosting on contrasting edges. As soon as you move the subject just a bit further, it is not a problem. The autofocus on this lens is flawless. Tamron is partially owned by Sony, so I guess that they have access to proper autofocus algorithms, and the focusing is indeed as good as with Sony lens. A7 III is also still the best camera in terms of the autofocus that I have tested. Autofocus on this combination is great, it is very fast if you set it that way, or it can be more cinematic with different settings. There is no hunting at all and the motor is completely silent. It works with all of autofocus features, including new real-time autofocus for humans and animals, which works with donkeys as well. A couple of weeks ago I have had an opportunity to try Cinelike's Fujifilm MK18-55mm T2.9. I learned a lot about what makes a good video lens there, so is Tamron 28-75mm Di3 RXD a good lens for video? First of all, it appears to be parfocal, which means that once you focus on your subject, you can zoom in or out, but your subject will stay in focus. That is important not only for zoom-ins, but also for composing, so it is great that Tamron 28-75 is parfocal. Another important thing for filmmakers is so-called focus breathing. There definitely is some amount of focus breathing visible with this lens. It is acceptable since it is primarily a stills lens, but it is clearly visible that objects are getting larger as you're focusing towards the minimal focus distance. This won't be visible in majority of scenes, so it won't be a problem most of the time. It would be a problem if it was a cine lens like the Fujifilm that I've tested, that one has no focus breathing at all, but it also has to be much larger because of that, and it is also much more expensive. I think that it is still a very good lens for video. Like most f2.8 standard zooms, it is not stabilized. Unless you are really good at shooting handheld or you are shooting slow motion, you probably want to use it on a tripod or on a gimbal. I've been testing this lens on Feiyu AK2000, which is currently my gimbal of choice. Together with A7 Mark III, this combination weighs about 1.2 kg, which is in my opinion okay for gimbal use, and it will work fine on most modern gimbals. Thanks to the linear focusing, it is also very suitable for the use of follow focus if you don't want to use the autofocus. I recently made a long-term review of Sony A7 Mark III after 1 year of using. I think that Tamron 28-75 f2.8 is also one of the reasons why the A7 III is still the best-selling full-frame mirrorless camera. You can have this combination for about $2,800, which is great price for what you are getting. A7 III has great sensor with outstanding dynamic range, ISO performance, the best autofocus system of all competitors, and great video features. When you combine that with f2.8 standard zoom lens, such as Tamron 28-75, you can get great results. That is why this combination kind of became bread and butter for more advanced content creators. 17-28mm f2.8 version of this lens has also been announced. I'm really looking forward to that lens. We can already see that it is very compact, and I hope that it will provide the same features that I like on 28-75mm version, and that the price will also be competitive. Tamron has also confirmed that they are working on longer Di3 RXD lens, which will probably be 75-210mm f2.8 to complete the holy trinity of zoom lenses. So overall, I am very happy with my Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 Di3 RXD. The main advantages are great optical qualities, bright aperture, compact size, decent build quality, great autofocus, and very reasonable price. The only disadvantages that I see are the rendition of bokeh in some specific situations and missing 4mm on the wide end. Overall, I definitely recommend this lens. It is a great match for A7 III and I am looking forward to 17-28mm version. So that's it for this video, thank you for watching, I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section and see you next time.